You are watching Xirtus.
Right. So what's interesting is you've got this idea of the Islamic occupation, which is supposed to be so long ago, and yet Austrians still speak with Arabic accents, basically. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Like there's a lot there that's still permeating the culture. So it must have been more recent than we think.
Correct. Mm. Very exciting field of.
Right.
Okay, so let's just to put it back into our mind, the two most important principles of power. The first one is the classic Machiavelli, divide and conquer. We all know that we are all divided all the time by the deep state, by the powerful. I call this a vertical division because we are divided by religion, by nationality, by the color of our skin, by our culture, by our language. There's many other things you could add here, you know, Trumpists and people who voted for Biden or whatever. But we are divided, and we are divided to keep us in small groups because then we are easier to keep in check. Um, but the real war that we experience throughout the ages actually follows a horizontal division because that is the real war is those up there, call them the elites, call them the deep state, whatever you want to call them,
The
against the rest
Elites,
of
I like it, like
humanity.
Elohim, the Elites.
Exactly. Yeah. That is the true war that is happening. They try to show us this division, you know, Ukrainians against Russians and whatever they're talking about. But in fact, it's the elite against the rest of the people. That is the first one. This one we can go. This is just an example for division. That's actually a German slide from Reich Gave. So he talked about
The
here we have.
Satanicians, Bald Spring and Springs and Zips. That's pretty scary. What is?
Yeah, exactly. So actually, this division is actually a Satanist division.
Oh my
Um,
God.
and and he actually put on here. So you have the Vedic Tartaric culture, which was basically all of Europe and went straight into Asia. And what they actually did, and you see that here, they actually divided us. The first thing
Mm.
that they divide us is the Germans and the Slavs from the rest of Europe. So now you have the Italians, you have the French, you have the Spanish, and you have the English.
The
So this
Gaelic
is
and stuff. Yeah.
exactly. So this is the so-called Romanic languages, right? So
Hmm.
Latin is also supposed to have been in Rome, and you have the Germanic languages here, and they literally messed up the language. So
And this line right here, the Southwest German zone into a lot of people, a lot of the Germans there have like red hair, right? Isn't that kind of like the red hair German zone? So it's right on the line because on the other side you've got a bunch of Norman French and you've got Norman English and Gaelics. So they cut right through somebody. They're just right
correct,
through somebody's hometown.
correct. So this is basically River Rhine and
Yeah, the Rhine. Yeah,
the
okay.
north part of the Alps, or you could even say Danube River, where the Romans had their limes, the border, you know.
Yeah.
And they make us think, so the Roman Catholic Church makes us think that culture traveled from south to north. So it was the Roman Empire that invented all the culture and they brought it to the club swinging Germans. But there was actually somebody made a very good point on this congress that I attended this past weekend, because he said if Germany was really so ugly, if there was only swamps and woods, why why would the Romans even bother to go there?
Because they
And
wanted
then
to
why?
swing in the Berlin clubs as well. Oh, swinging different kind of
Exactly.
clubs. Sorry.
Exactly. And they wanted to get the ass kicked right in the year
Right.
9 after
Yeah.
Christ. So Var was actually lost against Armenians.
I mean, the
But what?
whole story that Caesar built a bridge in a day and burned it down when they crossed is kind of sketch. It's a little hard to believe.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And then there is another piece of trivia I just want to share with you. What is really interesting, this language delusion that they did. And the two languages they wanted to mess up the most is actually Germans and Russians, because as George Friedman actually said, it was always the number one goal of the United States and also Britain before to keep Germans and Russians apart because they would have been too powerful, you know. So they literally
And the
messed up.
and the Danish. If you Danish, Germans, and Russians, it's very dangerous. That's the
Yeah, correct.
sorry, bad
Correct.
pun.
And they actually messed up the languages that bad that they literally turned around even the single letters. So when you look at the Cyrillic alphabet, the R is actually mirrored, and it's spelled or pronounced completely differently. And there are many others. The N is backwards, the P is backwards, and many other letters are simply backwards to make sure we don't understand each other.
Right. Yeah.
And one of our biggest, the biggest sons of our country, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, he actually caught on to this, and he discovered the rules that they used to mess up the languages. And that is actually from Faust, which you might know, Das Wissen einmal eins.
Oh.
So here you can actually find those rules. That is just a piece of trivia. Maybe we can talk about this a little bit more.
Go ahead, please elaborate. I'd love to hear the
while you elaborate, I'd also love to know, both from you, Martin, and Andreas, how do you think is it possible that if it is true that someone like Goethe or also potentially Schiller and some others actually were, I don't know how to call them, German romanticists or whatever, or having high morals, ideology, and a positive attitude towards humanity, how come they are still being, I almost want to say, forced upon people in school? At least if you attend an officially former Jesuit school like I did, which has a humanistic education, there they still teach it. Or maybe actually it's only for the elites anyways, if you get to the right schools. I'd be curious to that as well, because it's a key, just as you're pointing out.
I think they were just too big. You cannot ignore them. There's no way to ignore Goethe.
And in America,
that's any good. Maybe that could also be possible. You know, they can't make anything on their own.
Yeah, that's a big thing, is that they can just, it's easier to take something and to manipulate it. But in America, you know, Goethe is not that famous. You'd have to be in certain universities to even study German literature or something like that. So in Europe, all you have to do is you just sort of bastardize the context. Right. You say, okay, well, this was all happening in proud German times in Germany, and it's good for German culture, or for Austria, or for Europe, or for, you know, America. We just change who it's about a bit.
What is really wild about this, and next time I might elaborate on that and really show that to you. For those people who know German, there is actually YouTube videos of Mario Praz. You see his name down here, and he actually has a 5-hour video that talks about this language diversion. It is absolutely fantastic, and he explains it in detail how it happens. He actually explains how the German word for breakfast, Frühstück, is, you can completely develop that by using these 10 rules from Faust. You can make breakfast into Frühstück. And it does not even look alike at all, but it actually makes perfect sense. It is really, really wild. And I promise you, Andreas, I will bring you some of that next time.
That is fascinating.
I mean, really exciting.
It's completely possible that these rules developed in some, I don't want to say by accident, but you have to understand that, you know, Etruscan and the divisions of the Tartar language, you had print. And so some places that had print centuries earlier than the 15th or 16th century, like we're saying, we're looking at the backwards side of the print. And so Latin and the, you know, the Roman style, it seems to be that they literally were hand copying pictures, like the monks were of backwards textile prints. And so that's a big reason that they got things backwards. And you can see the difference between left to right and right to left because of that. In China and in parts of Asia, they continue to have print into the times of Martin Luther, you know, and they had it for centuries earlier, but they'd often do it vertical, you know, in places because of the confusion. So I think that shows, the vertical shows the interaction between the left and the right, and then the right and the left shows that there was a clear division, which in even mainstream history acknowledges, with the Mongol horde dividing Russia from the West. So, I mean, we have all the evidence regardless.
And just to give a little tidbit regarding Mario Praz, I believe I had even brought him up at some point before. From what I've seen now, I just posted it. You can search for him on Odyssey. Most stuff is in German. But what he's actually doing is, like, he's showing like a formula, which basically is you're able to exchange 2 letters, and you're able to sometimes forward a letter or change like a P to a T or something along those lines. And then what you actually get is you go from Sumerian, whatever it is they said, and then in German you have Papa, English would be father, but Romanian is tata, Hungarian is opa, or Romanian even Tata, Tartaria, like father,
Right.
fatherland.
They replaced
So-
the apostrophe symbol with the R sound, and that's why we get that extra R in Tata and Dada and Berber, Tartar. That
So-
R is an apostrophe in
In
Persian.
the end, it just really seems, because he's showing like 5 languages in a declination, always applying the same rule again and again. And there it really appears as if there's just a skeleton key formula that some monks or whoever could
Right.
devise. And then it just reiterate over it a few times. And then, in the end, the first language seems to have no resemblance to the fifth, just because you iterated 5 times. And that's because if you would imagine you're like a superpower, you're taking over all this culture, you want to divide them, you got to come up fast, I guess, with some languages.
Let me briefly hijack just to show, in case anyone hasn't studied Saint Cyril's Glagolitic script, but this is the keystone to unlock so many things, because these Dalmatian monks, and it's important to remember, Dalmatia was a place that had janissaries for the Turkish Ottomans and ended up after the siege of Candia in the control of the Roman Empire. So they had a back and forth going on, and the original Bible comes out of Pope Gregory the 13th in Croatia and Dalmatia using the Glagolitic script. So this script took every single letter system from around the Mediterranean and into Phoenicia and literally created an alphabet that decodes every single phoneme in a way that hasn't quite been replicated since. I mean, the only thing I can think of that kind of connects to it, of course, is Sanskrit, but the style of writing is undeniably more Slavic or Germanic or European. It's clearly more European. It doesn't have the calligraphic cursive that is so, it's much more of a print-based language.